Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and welcome proudly to the Singapore Convention Signing Ceremony and Conference. I'm Ravi Nadesan, your host for the day. Now, many of you have traveled from far and wide to be here for the convention, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to say welcome to Singapore. Thank you all for being here. Let's start by welcoming each other with a big round of applause to the convention. Thank you for being here in Singapore. It's great to see you. We will now present a short video on the Singapore Convention on Mediation and the critical role it plays in today's world. Today marks a significant milestone for international mediation. We are gathered here today to witness the signing ceremony of the Singapore Convention on Mediation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I take pride in inviting up on stage our guest of honor to deliver his formal address, the Prime Minister of Singapore. Please welcome Mr. Hsien Loong.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and a warm welcome to Singapore. Today, we are gathered to sign the United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation. Singapore is deeply honored to have been chosen by fellow UN member states to host the signing. And we are especially delighted to have this convention named the Singapore Convention on Mediation. The Singapore Convention was adopted by the UN General Assembly last December. More than 100 delegations, including country representatives and technical experts from observer, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations, worked on the convention between 2015 and 2018. The last similar attempt at an international approach to enforce mediation settlements was made in 2002. This was during discussions on the model law on international commercial conciliation. But at that time, no agreement could be reached. Therefore, I congratulate the many delegates and their supporting teams who have worked so hard to make today's breakthrough possible. The Singapore Convention allows parties that reach a mediated settlement in an international commercial dispute to enforce the settlement terms in the courts of the signatory countries. This will help advance international trade, commerce, and investment. Lengthy commercial disputes can severely disrupt normal business operations. They damage reputations, hurt share prices, and make it harder for companies to raise capital. They also dampen the confidence and morale of employees, shareholders, and other stakeholders. A robust framework to manage such conflicts can prevent such disputes from escalating unnecessarily or causing unintended consequences. Today, for cross-border disputes, many businesses rely either on arbitration enforced via the New York Convention or on litigation. The Singapore Convention on Mediation is the missing third piece in the international dispute resolution enforcement framework. Businesses will benefit from greater flexibility, efficiency, and lower costs, while states can enhance access to justice by facilitating the enforcement of mediated agreements. The Singapore Convention is also a powerful statement in support of multilateralism. Multilateralism is under pressure, but the solution is not to abandon it, but to improve it. Existing multilateral institutions are not perfect. Many are in need of urgent reform, suffer from a loss of confidence, or have practices and structures that are no longer fit for purpose. But we must recognize that these institutions have collectively brought the world growth and prosperity and contributed to the peace and security and international order that we have enjoyed for decades. Abandoning them would upend the rules-based world order that we have so painstakingly built up. Instead, we need to reform them and bring them up to date. We must make sure that they reflect current economic and political realities and ready them to deal with new issues created by the progress of technology and globalization. The alternative of a world without multilateral institutions and without widely accepted international rules, where might is right, disadvantages all countries, big and small. Such a world would be especially challenging for countries like Singapore. And that's why international treaties and the rule of law are especially important to us. Every word makes a difference, and when we sign a treaty, we will rigorously uphold what we have solemnly committed to. The Singapore Convention on Mediation demonstrates that countries are capable of achieving consensus with effort, creativity, and leadership. Today, a group of states have come together to recommit ourselves to multilateralism and to declare that we remain open for business. We are prepared to make binding commitments, and we are committed to preserve our relationships. I also want to acknowledge the role of the United Nations. Singapore was admitted to the UN in September 1965, just a month after we became an independent republic. On that occasion, our first foreign minister, Mr. S. Rajaratnam, assured the General Assembly that Singapore would join other nations in efforts to realize the aims and objectives of the UN Charter and pledged Singapore's loyalty and unflinching support to the UN for these efforts. And through these last 54 years, we have stayed true to our promise. The Singapore Convention on Mediation is the latest example of Singapore's commitment to the UN, and through it, to the international community that we belong to. We may be a small country with limited manpower and no natural resources, but nevertheless, we do our best to contribute our part. Many of you know Professor Tommy Koh, one of our most recognized diplomats. He chaired the third UN Conference on the Law of the Sea that negotiated what became the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. A more recent example is Ms. Rina Lee, who was elected President of the Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, BBNJ, last year. Two young women from Singapore were instrumental in turning the Singapore Convention into reality. Ms. Natalie Morris Sharma, who was chair of the working group responsible for negotiating the convention at UNCITRAL, and Ms. Sharon Ong, who headed the Singapore delegation in the negotiations. Singapore is very grateful to them for their efforts. Our work does not stop here. The signing of the Singapore Convention marks the start of a long-term commitment by Singapore to promote the Convention and see to its adoption. Later today, Singapore and the United Nations will sign an MOU on an UNCITRAL Academy here, which will promote the development, understanding, and use of international dispute resolution instruments globally. We will also continue our broader efforts to work with friends and partners to advance the cause of justice. Over the years, we've built up a sound and comprehensive system of rules, laws, and agreements and become a trusted Asian base for many businesses. Businesses value the connectivity, predictability, long-term stability, commitment to rule of law, and international expertise that they can find in Singapore. Several other significant initiatives on international dispute settlement are taking place here this week, together with the signing of the Singapore Convention. INSOL International, a worldwide federation of 44 member associations comprising restructuring and insolvency professionals, launched its first overseas office outside London in Singapore to serve as its Asian hub. The American Arbitration Association, International Center for Dispute Resolution, the AAA-ICDR, a leading provider of alternative dispute resolution services for parties in commercial disputes. It will open its Asia headquarters and case management center in Singapore. The International Bar Association held its inaugural Asia-Pacific Arbitration Conference yesterday. And tomorrow, the newly refurbished Maxwell Chambers Suites, the world's first integrated dispute resolution complex, which houses the largest number of case management offices of dispute resolution institutions worldwide, will have its grand opening. Collectively, these events affirm Singapore's role as a leading international business and legal center. Once again, I would like to welcome all the delegates to Singapore. I congratulate the 46 countries on signing the Singapore Convention and the other 24 countries who have joined us today to support what the Convention stands for. I wish you a productive conference and an enjoyable stay here. I hope you'll find it useful and will come back to attend the next Singapore Convention conference a year from now on the 1st of September 2020. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister Lee, sir, we thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now honored that the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, has provided a video message to commemorate this event. Here it is.
I'm pleased to address the signing ceremony of the UN Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation. I look forward to the role this important new instrument can play in facilitating international trade, an area in which cooperation is essential for advancing sustainable development and global prosperity. By providing a more streamlined international framework for mediation, this convention can help to ensure a more efficient and harmonized process for the settlement of commercial disputes. And in doing, it will also help strengthen the rule of law and highlight the benefits of multilateralism. Congratulations again on this achievement, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guterres. We now invite on stage, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Legal Affairs, who is representing the United Nations Secretary General at this event. With his formal address, ladies and gentlemen, once again, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Stephen Mathias.
Prime Minister Hsien Loong, Excellencies, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be with you here on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations to open the signing ceremony of a landmark convention, the United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation that will be known as the Singapore Convention on Mediation. please allow me to express my gratitude to the government of Singapore for its decisive contributions to the preparation of this instrument and for hosting this remarkable event today. It is with great pleasure that I acknowledge the participation of so many countries from all parts of the world, gathering here in Singapore to express support for multilateralism and the peaceful means of solving disputes promoted by the Convention. Mediation is an ancient practice, deeply enshrined in many traditional and tribal societies for more than 3,000 years. It found its way into Roman law in the year 530 and is also a central feature of societies inspired by Confucianism. Mediation existed in the Middle East hundreds of years ago through the practice of al-wasata. The culture of mediation is indeed widespread from east to west and north to south. We at the United Nations actively use mediation as a means for peaceful settlement of disputes. And the Secretary General has recently reaffirmed our commitment to mediation, peace building, and sustainable development, using effectively mediation resources that are deployed in various ways and by a wide range of actors. Witnessing the signature of a United Nations Convention on Mediation by more than 40 states today is therefore a great privilege. The Singapore Convention on Mediation was adopted by consensus by the United Nations General Assembly in December 2018. It is the most recent achievement in long-standing involvement by UNCITRAL, the UN Commission on International Trade Law, in mediation. It is also the first treaty in this field, bridging legal systems and reflecting a worldwide consensus beyond cultural differences. This innovative convention brings what was missing in the international framework for dispute settlement, an effective mechanism to enforce international settlement agreements. In adopting the convention, the General Assembly expressed its conviction that this instrument will, and I'm quoting, contribute to the development of harmonious international economic relations, end of quotation. The contribution of the convention to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals also deserves to be underlined. Let me mention a few salient features. First, mediation is known for its significant benefits, such as reducing the instances where long and costly litigation would be needed, facilitating the administration of international transactions by commercial parties and generating savings in the administration of justice by states, and generating savings more broadly. The convention will undoubtedly enhance the use of mediation and will therefore foster access to justice. In addition, by promoting settlements of disputes driven by party autonomy, the Convention establishes mediation as a credible and effective path for commercial parties to not only resolve commercial disputes, but to preserve their long-term relationships. In so doing, it contributes to the mitigation of unnecessary costs and risks, and it builds confidence in the ability to engage in cross-border trade. This, in turn, creates a fertile ground for sustainable investment and innovation. The convention is also expected to bring certainty and stability to the international framework on mediation, thereby promoting more prosperous, stable, and sustainable international trade relationships among states and regions, further contributing to economic and social development. I sincerely hope that this convention will lead to the universal recognition of mediation as a powerful, efficient, and non-confrontational method for the settlement of trade and investment disputes. Mediation is being promoted globally but the concept of mediation is not new in Asia. Informal mediation has been practiced in this region for a very long time. Notably, the Asian cultures are very much known for their non-adversarial traditions, their emphasis on harmony and social cohesion. It therefore came as no surprise that Singapore played an important role in the preparation of this convention and is now hosting the signing ceremony. Indeed, as the Prime Minister noted, Singapore's diplomats played a key role in the negotiation of the convention, including by serving as the chairperson of the working group from which the convention emerged. My office, the UN Office of Legal Affairs, is proud to support, through its International Trade Law Division, the work of UNCITRAL. Let me share with you some insights on this commission. UNCITRAL is recognized as the core legal body of the United Nations system in the field of international trade law, and has been mandated since its establishment in 1966 to promote the progressive harmonization and modernization of the international trade law framework. For more than 50 years, UNCITRAL has been functioning as a platform where states can find common solutions to problems that arise in international economic relations, and that can be more efficiently resolved on a multilateral basis. UNCITRAL legal standards are developed with universal participation from states, as well as international, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations that have relevant expertise. From its very inception, UNCITRAL has been actively working on a harmonized system of international dispute resolution, which is an important factor in the development of international trade. Having over time fully acknowledged the benefits of mediation, the United Nations has supported its use in the field of international trade. As a pioneer in this field, UNCITRAL adopted as early as 1980 the UNCITRAL conciliation rules, which were the first international steps taken to develop rules on mediation. The rules ensure that mediation is tailored to meet the needs and expectations of the parties. They provide an international model that guarantees the inherent flexibility of mediation. Over the years, it became apparent that contractual solutions alone were not sufficient to meet the needs of the parties. So UNCITRAL developed a model legislative framework on mediation and adopted in 2002 the model law on international commercial conciliation. The model law seeks to protect the integrity and flexibility of mediation, as well as to avoid over-regulation of its procedure. Last year, as we know, in 2018, to further promote mediation as an effective dispute resolution method and to ensure predictability and certainty in its outcomes, UNCITRAL developed two instruments in parallel: the Singapore Convention on Mediation and the model law. This is the first time that UNCITRAL has prepared both the convention and a model law in parallel. Such a multilateral lawmaking process provides states with the flexibility to adopt either the convention, the model law as a standalone text, or both the convention and the model law as complementary instruments of a comprehensive legal framework on mediation. While the model law is consistent with the convention, there are some differences between the two instruments. The model law is designed to assist states in reforming and modernizing their internal laws on mediation. The convention, by its nature, is expected to offer a higher degree of harmonization, as it also provides for limited reservations. Allow me for just a moment to delve into the contents of the Singapore Convention on Mediation. Uncertainty surrounding the enforcement of settlement agreements had been identified as a main obstacle to the greater use of mediation. UNCITRAL's response is this convention. The convention sets the standards for enforcing and invoking settlement agreements. the requirements for reliance on settlement agreements, and the grounds for refusing to grant relief. By unifying the rules related to enforcement, the Convention provides for clearer and simpler mechanisms on enforcement and avoids recourse to burdensome domestic enforcement procedures. Aside from the legal certainty brought by the Convention, a certain level of flexibility is also provided to states and to the disputing parties. First, the Convention focuses on the enforcement of the settlement agreement instead of the rules for the mediation process. Second, the Convention contains only limited form requirements for settlement agreements, with the main purpose to distinguish these agreements from other possible forms of settlement. Third, the Convention allows for the application of a more favorable law or treaty for achieving expedited enforcement of settlement agreements. And fourth, the Convention does not delve into procedural details, as it foresees the application of procedural rules of states where the Convention is silent. We at the United Nations expect that the implementation of this Convention will bring legal certainty and establish a strong legal framework for the fair and efficient settlement of disputes arising in international commercial relations, in a similar fashion as the New York Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards did for the development of international arbitration since its adoption 60 years ago, a convention that is now in force for 160 member states. To conclude, this signing ceremony is a unique opportunity to celebrate a successful achievement of multilateralism, to express gratitude to all delegations who took part in the negotiation and drafting of the convention, and to express once more our commitment to further the progressive harmonization and modernization of international trade law. I also want to thank again our excellent host, Singapore. It is our hope that many states will become party to the Singapore Convention on Mediation and thereby contribute to further strengthening the rule of law, the development of international trade, and sustainable development in all regions. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mathias. We invite you to remain on stage, sir, for a very special moment for us, the orchid naming ceremony. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will be marking this historic occasion by unveiling a special orchid hybrid. You can see it coming right now. There you are. It gives me great pleasure to announce that the Singapore Convention on Mediation, to be signed shortly, will be the first UN treaty to have an orchid named after it. Very nice indeed, isn't it? That deserves a round of applause, doesn't it? There we are. To join Mr. Mathias on stage, we are honored to invite Mr. Hsien Loong, Minister for Home Affairs and Minister for Law, Singapore. Let's welcome him with a round of applause as well. Also, Dr. Nigel Taylor, Group Director of Singapore Botanic Gardens. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to present this unique Singapore Botanic Gardens orchid hybrid to commemorate this special occasion of the signing of the Singapore Convention on Mediation. We now invite Dr. Taylor to officiate the naming of this orchid. Dr. Taylor will first remove the parentage name plaque signifying the orchid's parentage, and this is what it's called, Vanda Dr. Anik and Aranda Chak Kwan. Right, he's doing it right now. We now invite both Minister Hsien Loong and Mr. Mathias to place the new name plaque into the orchid pot. There we are. It's now turned around for all of you to see. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the Aranda Singapore Convention on Mediation. There we are. Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. The orchid named after the convention. Proud moment. Dr. Taylor will now present the birth certificate. It's a special moment for us, ladies and gentlemen. Birth certificate of the orchid to Minister Hsien Loong and Mr. Mathias. right here. Let's celebrate this with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Very special. The orchid is named to commemorate today's signing of the Singapore Convention on Mediation, the first United Nations treaty to be named after Singapore. We now invite the gentlemen on stage for a nice photograph together, shall we? There we are, a nice photograph. Okay, we have that taken. Thank you, Minister Hsien Loong and Mr. Mathias. Thank you very much.